From Brooklyn concrete to boardrooms and back again, Yvette Davila carved a path through hip-hop's golden era and found her true purpose on the other side of unimaginable loss. Grief didn't end her story, it revealed it.
I'm a Puerto Rican kid. I grew up on salsa. Salsa was like my mother's music. And my family, my uncle played the cuatro, which is a special guitar from Puerto Rico that has 4 strings. And so I grew up with that. That was my original soundtrack. But when hip hop came around, that was mine. It belonged to me. And there were faces like mine. There were other kids that came from the same backgrounds. And we made not only a music, but a full cultural form, a form of culture. We created our own culture from, again, the concrete. You know, I had an opportunity to write a bio for DJ Red Alert. And he told me the origins of hip hop, and that his first sentence was, hip hop was born from the Vietnam War. So according to Red Alert, and I'm gonna repeat the story that he gave me because to me, that's law. He lived it. And he said that our fathers were all sent to the Vietnam War, leaving mothers and the children in these already destitute areas of New York City to fend for themselves. How they did it, I couldn't even imagine. And so when they returned home, many were addicted, many were not mentally well. And so there was still a need for the mothers to continue to take care of their families. And he told me the stories of how we didn't have places to play our music. So we plugged into the light post and we stole the electricity. And we brought our turntables out there. We didn't have canvases to paint on, so we painted on the walls. The creativity was not going to stop. We didn't have the opportunity or the privilege of opportunity. We had to make it ourselves. And what a phenomenon is that? My audacity comes from a place of extreme necessity. I've lived in a state of fight or flight almost all of my life. Abuse, addiction, destitution, poverty, colonization, all of these factors make for a very desperate, anxious, disruptive core. And for me, my choices was stay down here in all of that evil. It felt evil. If I gave up, then I was gonna fall back. And falling back for me was not an option. I wasn't gonna go there. I had an alcoholic mother, a drug addicted sister. My sister had AIDS. She was an IV drug user. I've had family members die of overdoses. I mean, I call it to my therapist, I call it the house of horrors. That's how I refer to where I grew up. There's a guy named Chris Santiago who lived in Lakeview Projects in East Harlem. And I would always see him with his big van because he was one of the pioneers of the street team, which is, guerrilla marketing. And so I asked him, how can I be down? He's like, well, what do you do? And I said, I write. I write really well. And so he was like, okay. He gave me a job, $500 a month. And I would write all of his marketing recaps because he was working with the record labels. And I did all of his kind of paperwork, his admin. And he paid me $500 a month. That was my retainer. And then he introduced me to 2 very important people in my career. And I met those two guys, and they gave me my first opportunities. So James brought me into Violator. He moved from Bad Boy to Violator, and I was his assistant there. And then I was there for about a year, and Sean Pecos Costner came calling, and he was like, managing Angie Martinez, and she's going on the road. She was doing this album, and her first album, and she needed a road manager, and he asked me if I would do it, and I was like, yeah, I'm ready. I left a job that had benefits, that had a regular salary, and I jumped on the road. I took a chance on myself. I took a chance on Angie, and I took a chance on us misfits, Puerto Rican misfits in hip hop. And we really blazed away. Okay, so there was this guy named Rob Love. Rob's name is synonymous with Def Jam. Def Jam was like the holy grail in hip hop. If you're in hip hop, Def Jam's like the holy grail. And you would always know that Rob was moving culture because any club you went into, Rob's name was getting shouted out in the club by the DJ. Young me was like, man, I want to do that. Like, I want to do Rob Love's job. Well, in hip hop, in my era of hip hop, we moved around with our clan. You locked in with somebody and your crew. So I was part of L.A. Reid's crew of executives. And L.A. Reid eventually became the chairperson of Def Jam Recordings. And I was hired to do Rob Love's job. And I even had his office, I had his desk, I had his extension, and I did the work that he did. And so young Yvette manifested the beacon. I'll sit back and listen to a record on the radio, or something comes up on a playlist, and I'm like, I worked that record. So like my daughter's always like, Mom, did you work that record? Because I get very excited. I've made so many records, hit records, like #1 on charts. I've worked with the best, Jay-Z, Kanye West, Rihanna. I mean, you name it, and I've made an indelible mark. And it makes me really, really proud. It's probably actually 2005 or very, very early 2006. My friend DJ Khaled gave me a call. This is when he was actually a DJ, right? Before he became the phenomenon that he is. And he called me, he gave me a heads up. Rick Ross is gonna be signed. I'm like, who's Rick Ross? I had no clue who he was. And so he said, Evie, you got to take care of him. Like, take care of him. I said, okay, no problem. So we had our executive meeting. We're all in the big conference room, sitting around, explaining to him what our departments are, what we're going to be in charge of. And so when the meeting was over and everyone was dispersing, I went up to him and I said, so Khaled said I'm supposed to take care of you. So I'm going to take care of you. I got you. I got your back. And so he looked at me, he said, Khaled's my brother. I was like, Khaled's my brother too, so that makes us family. And since that day, we were locked in. I was one of the only women that was happily married, and I'm gonna emphasize that, happily married, an executive vice president of a major record label, happily married with children, present with my children. One of the only ones in that era. And I felt the tug of sacrifice. But I was determined to have a lot. Like, I was determined to do it all. I wanted to be married. And then I so-called retired from music back in 2014. I was out for about 5 years. And then he came looking for me in 2019. And he actually didn't come to me. He went to Chris first, Chris's office, and he was like, what's Evie doing? And Chris was like, why don't you call her? And he called me and I met with him and he asked me to come back and we've been rocking ever since. On June 3rd, 2021, I received a phone call from my daughter-in-law, Renata. She was very confused. She said that something had happened to Dasan. No one performed, no one touched him, no one performed CPR in those vital minutes after he collapsed. The venue didn't have an AED. No one thought to defibrillate him. 15 minutes it took for the ambulance to arrive. 20 minutes it took them to revive him. They defibrillated him 4 times. He went 40 minutes without oxygen. Finally, they revived him. And he stuck around for 8 days. Losing my firstborn, my son, my only son, has taught me that life has to be lived in purpose. Has to be. We're all born with a purpose. And blessed is that person who realizes that purpose in enough time to do something about it, to live in that purpose. And because I realized that after his passing, I realized his purpose and I realized my purpose. That is probably what saved me, because I wanted to die with him. And I realized that I had not reached my purpose, although he had. And that's why he could go, because he had seen his purpose, and his purpose was to usher me into my purpose. I am a healer, a psychic, intuitive medium. It is a blessing and a gift from God that I would not have realized, probably, had Dasan not passed away. It brought me here. His transition gave birth to my ascension. But it's super important when you're grieving and you're on a grief journey to have a process for grieving, something that you do. So one of the things that I did for Dasan when he passed away is I did a 14-day novena. That's where you get together with in my, like when I was a child, it's held in the living room, or sort of like sitting Shiva. But people sit around in a circle and you say the rosary and you pray and you share fond memories of your loved one. What a beautiful way for 2 weeks afterwards to share in community your grief. The saying is you die twice. You die when you die, and then you die again when no one says your name. So how do you keep love alive? You say their name. And so it's an act of self-love for me to say my name. So my name is Yvette Davila, and I'm in front of the camera now. And I'm writing a book, and I have a podcast. And yeah, I'm stepping into that #1 position.